Good afternoon, everyone on the East Coast. Good morning to everyone joining us from the West Coast. If we haven't met before, I'm Alex Norman. I'm the co-founder of TechTO. I'm an operator with 2 exits. I've done a bit of professional services in my life, and I'm an active investor as the head of Canada for AngelList and a partner at N49P. We host Founders on Funding to help demystify the fundraising process and the relationship between investors and founders. We know there's a lot of information out there. There's blog posts, videos, TikToks, but our community keeps on telling us they don't really know what's going on behind the scenes, and they don't know what that relationship really is like. So that's why we launched Founders on Funding. We do it every second week, and we're happy to have you join the live recordings. Today, I'm excited to feature Andrew McLeod, co-founder and CEO at Certn, and Shawn Abbott, partner at Inovia Capital. But before we get started, if you haven't found it yet, there's a chat on the side of your screen just over there. Go ahead and introduce yourself and let us know where you're joining us from today. And also, if you want, put some Q&A questions in the Q&A tab, and I'll try to weave it into today's conversation. So let's get started. I would love to have Andrew and Shawn join us. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Alex, thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for joining us. This is not your first time talking at a TechTO related event. I think you were one of the first guests at Tech Vancouver in the first event we did, and then you came back for Fireside a few years later to talk about the VC founder relationship. So this is a bit old hat for you.
Yeah, a little bit. My tune has changed a little bit since then, but definitely awesome to be back, and thanks for having me.
So where are you joining us from today?
My home in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada.
And Shawn, thank you for joining us. Are you in Calgary today?
Good morning, Alex. You bet. Yeah, I'm in my office. I've got a grueling commute. It's about 8 seconds from home.
Do you get traffic from kids? I get traffic from kids trying to tackle me when I get to my room.
Well, I got the certificate in the mail that says I successfully graduated my kids into adults. Job well done, and so freedom. Freedom 55, man.
Wow. I think there's a whole other conversation we can have another day about that, because I could definitely use some tips right now. For people that don't know you, and we'll get more into your backgrounds, but Andrew, can you give me the 30-second overview of who you are and what you're doing right now?
Sure. I'm the CEO of Certn. We are a company that is changing the way people look at human risk intelligence. So basically background checks. And I've been doing startups since I was 17.
So just that's about 10 years now?
Yeah, exactly. I'm 34, believe it or not.
Wow, that's amazing. And Shawn, just 30-second background of who you are.
17 as well, as it turns out. Thought I could make money writing software on an Apple II, and that turned out to be right. Look, I've started a couple of companies, some more successful than others. Sold the public company I was running some years ago and co-founded Inovia with Chris Arsenault. And didn't realize at the time, but it became our next startup. We've built an incredible platform. We just, our partners, my partners and I, we just love actively supporting founders that are committed to building sustainable global businesses. Huge, ambitious goal. And Andrew's like the perfect case study. It's great.
He knows how to make me blush.
Well, we're gonna get more of that a bit. Actually, Shawn, talking about your background, let's go a bit deeper into it. So you did say before you started Inovia, before you became a venture capitalist, you were involved with a couple of startups like Rainbow Technologies.
Yeah.
What did you learn from being an operator, and how does that impact your views of venture capitalist?
Alex, I don't understand how you can be in the position of a supporting actor for a founder as a board member unless you've done it yourself, and to have empathy and to know what it feels like to not make payroll at the end of the month for yourself because you're taking care of everyone else, and to go through those inevitable near-death experiences, and it's really the conviction that gets you through those. So it gives me a completely different lens to look at and build a relationship with founders. And I'm privileged to be in the position of being able to participate as part of these incredible teams that we build around founders, as we are with Andrew. And I'm sure, Andrew, you're going to talk to how you've brought people like Elizabeth and so forth to bear in your team of the board. And so that's how it's shaped me, Alex. Yeah.
And then a couple more questions before I go back to Andrew. Like you said, Inovia is your most current startup, or maybe your last one. So you started.
Well,
I think
it's 50 people now. I mean,
yeah.
it's feeling like a real business. It's a real business. Yeah.
But I think you started in about 2007.
Inovia, we started in 2007. That's right. That was our first fund. We've raised half a dozen funds now. So what's changed for us is it has become a sustainable global business. We have a distributed team. I have partners in the Bay Area, of course, and London, and across Canada. Our core is our Canadian network and our ability with a playbook, experience, and talent to support founders that are building businesses with a Canadian component. Yeah.
And so just one last question before we go back to Andrew. Then, what is Inovia's current thesis? Like, when do you like entering? What gets you excited? There's a lot of stuff going in Canada. I imagine you can't cover it all.
No, BC. The one thing that has not changed is that it is a network game. It is about relationships, and we have access to opportunities to back founders because of who we have become and who we are, and we're introduced to founders that we want to back with conviction because of those experiences and relationships. So we certainly have certain sectors that we have strength in. One of those for me is security. I have a background, my partners, Todd and others, have a strong background building and operating security related businesses. And I've had a thesis for some time. There's an emerging next generation trust infrastructure that's really prerequisite to building global commerce on the internet, and saw Certn as a key element in that. It's one of several in portfolio companies that are part of this security thesis. But the space that you're playing in, Andrew, as you and I have discussed, is such disruption right now. It's a very complex space. It's ripe for a reinvention and consolidation. And so all of that provides turmoil, stress, and opportunity.
It sounds like a great way to disrupt value and create value.
Yeah.
And so, Andrew, like you said, you've been doing startups for 17 years now. You did, from what I remember, you did 3 startups before Certn. I think the first time you were on stage was talking about Rent Moolah. Like, what, love to hear a quick hit of those 3 startups and what you learned from them and how they've informed Certn.
Yeah, well, I mean, so there are 3 startups that I talk about. There are countless more that never made it. And the ones that never made it were probably the ones where I learned the most. But in the 3 startups that I typically talk about, the first one, I was at Acadia University, living on campus, needed to figure out a way to pay for Molson Canadian and Coors Light were the drinks of choice back then. And so I started a company that allowed you to buy textbooks online. It had a really innovative name. It was called Campus Bay. So I've learned a lot since, kind of knocking off eBay, back in 2005. And I mean, that business was great. And to be honest, I didn't have much of a failure. So with that business, I was able to invest in real estate when it sold and do a bunch of other stuff, but I didn't actually know failure. And as an 18, 19-year-old, that can be a little bit dangerous. So we don't talk about the dark ages in between. And then Rent Moolah. So back in, I guess it was 2013, I had the privilege of helping start Rent Moolah with the co-founders, Philip and Patrick. Got to be part of a huge growth story there. And then, one of the things I learned is that I could start something on my own, have a larger stake. And I really wanted to change the world. I felt that I had taken Rent Moolah as far as I could go personally, and had this idea around building trust and the importance of building trust in an ecosystem, whether it's between an employer, an employee, or a tenant and a landlord, or a lender and a borrower. There was a lot of friction in that process. It was slow, it was time consuming, it was expensive, and it was uncomfortable for everyone involved. And so my partners and best friends, Owen and Evan, and I were on a trip to Tofino, and we started talking about this idea, and we got really passionate about it. And that's when Certn was born. So it's been an incredible ride since then. And part of Certn actually was we only wanted to do business with people that we loved. You know, we weren't concerned about money. We were concerned about fulfilling our mission, and whether it was our investors, our customers, our employees, we wanted to make sure that we built this culture around inclusion and bring on great people that really enjoyed the ride. And I was privileged to meet Shawn actually at Metabridge when I was at Rentmula. And I remember we won the startup competition at Metabridge, and met Shawn in his helicopter. Evan and I got out of the helicopter and we're like, that was the smartest guy we've ever met. We need to make sure we get that guy involved. So Shawn didn't realize it, but there was like years in the making.
So there's a lot to break down here. So first of all, it sounds
Tofino.
like
It's all about Tofino.
Yeah, exactly.
What we were talking about beforehand. So you know, I think, are we saying the whole Canadian ecosystem should relocate to Tofino? I think that might ruin its magic.
I mean, I think it's a magic time. There's a lot of great things that happen in Tofino. I had a 1981 Volkswagen Westphalia, so I like to say that we were driving to Tofino, but the battery died. So Owen and Evan were pushing while I was steering for, you know, parts of the journey, especially the ones that required the most thinking. But yeah, I mean, everyone should relocate to Tofino, at least for, you know, the foundations of starting their business.
So was Certn founded in Tofino or Victoria?
It was actually founded in Vancouver.
Okay.
So we started the company officially out of my sunroom in my condo in Vancouver. And the idea, we were in Tofino for a weekend, but it was actually founded there. And then Owen, Evan, and I were looking to hire in Vancouver. It was hard to find talent. It was hard to, you know, find people that were going to buy into our brilliant idea in Vancouver to actually help us build it, because none of us, you know, contrary to popular belief, I am not an engineer and I can't really code. And so, you know, we had great InVision mocks, but it was hard to find talent, and there was Amazon and Microsoft that we were competing against. And I have two friends here in Victoria, Owen Matthews and Richard Egley at Alacrity and Wesley Clover. I actually lost a bet. So I came to Victoria. I was working on a new van after my Westphalia had passed. May she rest in peace. And Rich was helping me wire the van. And he said, "Why don't you move to Victoria? You're always here for surfing and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Your grandfather lives here." And I was like, "Oh, there's no talent and money in Victoria." And he's like, "Want to bet?" And I lost that bet, and I have been so thankful I lost that bet ever since.
So you guys are now based in Victoria.
Yep.
I guess it's really early on in the company. So, was there anyone with big technical chops in the co-founding team?
Yeah. So part of us moving to Victoria, we brought in a co-founding team of four engineers. So three of them, you know, masters of computer science and machine learning. One of them, an old surf buddy of mine who had moved to Victoria, and so, you know, our co-founding team of seven was four data scientists, an accountant, a salesperson, and other, which that would be me.
Hey, the generalist, the one that makes it happen.
Yeah.
The magician. So you've got seven people. You're in Victoria. You have this idea about trust, about building trust. So what are the next steps? At this point, do you start talking to Shawn and other investors? How do you get this actually off the ground? What was your idea? Because like even back then, I feel like there was other potential competitors. Like I think Checker may have existed already then. So
yeah,
how do you launch? How do you go from 7 people to launching, and when did you bring investors in?
Well, the first thing we did is tried to find a market. So whenever I start a business, I try and find someone who's willing to pay for it before we actually build it. So this was early days of InVision. And for those of you that haven't used an InVision mock, it is like the greatest thing ever. Because for those that aren't that tech savvy, you can go and you can present this awesome experience, and you don't need to know how to code. You know, a little bit of Photoshop, and you can you can show your potential customers exactly what you're going to build, and they can change it and tweak it. And so we were looking for customers before we started building, and then we started building our MVP. And we were really fortunate that, you know, we had some of our own personal money saved up, and then actually kind of just before Shawn, and this is all like, this is where the world gets really small. Scott Lake, who was one of the co-founders of Shopify, Rasul, Hannes, like kind of a bunch of really successful Victoria angels, people that have had incredible success, kind of got together and we started working with them as advisors, and they wanted to invest. And then our parents were, you know, they started believing that that we weren't drug dealers or, you know, doing something untoward, and they could see the value. So we started getting friends and family investment, and that's when Shawn and Inovia and the Inovia team first invested.
So Shawn, I'd love to hear your perspective, because so it sounds like you already met Andrew and the team before, you know, and it sounds like you had a thesis on the future of I guess, security and trust. Yeah. So when Andrew approached you, like, what do you first remember of Andrew and Certn, and then what convinced you guys to write a check?
Look, I think at that stage, that was that was sort of the discovery round, is what we called it in our fund. We had strong mutual connections of the network with folks like Scott and Rasul. Rasul's an active advisor within Inovia, and had been with us, I think, in Metabridge that years earlier as well. I think all three of us were there that year. So Rasul's one of those people, when he sort of nudges you and said, "Hey, here's someone to keep an eye on." You know, you bump that up in your priority list, and I think what's apparent to new founders, many of our audience today, Alex, that are thinking about fundraising, starting businesses, but maybe appears as a frustration rather than an opportunity, is that these relationships are what drive the confidence and trust necessary to support collaboration, including capital. And so for someone responsible for allocating capital, which is this sort of weighty fiduciary responsibility, I rely on the trust that I have from prior interactions with people. What's their say-do ratio? How long have I known? And that's normal. And so the opportunity in observing that, I think, for your audience today is, don't complain about the fact that an Andrew has better access to capital because of those relationships. Recognize that the best way to get started in being who you want to be to sources of capital is to start working through that network. And it's a well understood playbook, and you can talk about it that way. And it's a superpower that you need to develop, because your ability to present your vision in a compelling way, as Andrew was able to do, and to disarm the kind of skepticism and negativity to build a relationship of trust, are key success factors with your customers, with attracting talent, and exactly the same with attracting capital. So it's kind of a self-solving problem that you do need to put your shoulder into that. We all have as founders. I found that early on, and I find successful founders are people who figure that out early on and really put their shoulder into it. So it was an easy decision for me to participate in that as a discovery check. And I brought in Hannah Jokowski, who's one of my investment team members, and asked her to really spend time every month with Andrew, with the team, and just watch what's happening, to give us that information asymmetry of knowing when to pounce. And you know, that's the formula, right? That we work on. We invest the time and energy to demonstrate the value we can add, to build the relationship, to understand when it may make sense to lean in or not. And sometimes we're right and sometimes we're wrong, but that's a calculated investment. And so Hannah did that skillfully. And when Andrew went to raise his next round, we were right there, and we fucked it up because because I met with Andrew for coffee, I whipped out, and I listened to Andrew, and you were a little off that you'd been drinking the day before or something. What the hell was going on? Like it was
8 a.m. I'd already started,
and it was 8 a.m. I booked it too early. I booked it. So So look, I said, you know what? We're going to sit this one out. It feels like you're still hunting for product market fit. I don't know. But I want to be the guy that you sort of, you got that clarity of vision. You're ready to race, and we're going to be all in with deep conviction. And maybe that's next time. I think that's what I said. And we didn't participate in that route. And you got another great investor that is incredibly valuable on the board and has backed you, and as part of the team. And this is not a winner take all game. It's about teams.
So there's a lot of wisdom there, and I'd like to break that down a bit. So first of all, when you say it's a discovery check, and again, different firms have different approaches to different rounds.
Yeah.
What are so it sounds like, hey, this is like a low risk investment for us. And what are you trying to discover?
We're trying to build relationship, and we're trying to get a sense of the ability to detect when there's alignment, when we can have conviction about really leaning in. And it requires, it's a trust building exercise.
And then Andrew, on the flip side of that, at that first round, what are you expecting of your investors? Because everyone talks about they're expecting a lot, but sometimes it's really just capital. What were you expecting from Inovia? And what it sounds like they got very involved, and how was it helpful, and what did they do after that first initial check?
Well, so I mean, we had a thesis where, we wanted to bring on really great people and have them be a part of the company. And we knew that even though Inovia was going to give us a small check, to them, it was meaningful for us. So I got to meet all of the Inovia founders. There was the Inovia Summit.
Right.
I had Hannah that I talked to on a regular basis.
Right.
I now had a whole bunch of peers and a big network. And I also had Shawn's ear. So when I had an idea or a concept, I was able to call Shawn, and not that Shawn wouldn't pick up, but he's a busy guy, and I would say he's probably the smartest guy I've ever met. So, to be able to have access to somebody like that was really important. And at that stage, that first check, you're relying on a network of investors that you need to trust. And for me, I was really strategic in the fact that I choose my investors as much as they choose me. And I wanted, without Shawn knowing, without Inovia knowing, long before we had even started Certn, I knew that I wanted Inovia as part of our whatever business I was involved in. And so I really got to leverage the network, which was really powerful. Especially you're trying to find product market fit. You need people to test out your service. We got into human resources pre-employment screening, and I'd say half of the Inovia portfolio companies helped support us by testing it out, putting us in touch with their HR departments, giving us raw feedback, and that was awesome. I mean, so valuable.
So talk. So you got this discovery check. You're now funded. You have 7 co-founders, and you have to find product market fit. So tell us a bit about what you had to do, what you were looking at doing, and also then after that, it sounds like how you leverage your investors. One was using their portfolio companies to test out the product, but love to hear a bit about that journey to product market fit. Yeah.
So the journey to product market fit is never a straight line.
What? I thought it was just like this, just connect the dots.
Well, you knew tenant applicant screening for the rent marks, remember, Rula. So and that was part of my discombobulation early on too, is that you were quickly running experiments, you were assessing the results of those and readjust, which is exactly what you need to be doing. The key success factor is not being right in an early stage startup. It's quickly running experiments and using the data.
And that's exactly what we did. When we first started, we knew that we could get revenue from our contacts in our landlord contacts, our property management contacts, and we started building out that way. And, we thought that there were some things that we could do that would be really different, but didn't add value. And then there were other things that we didn't think would be that great that added a ton of value. And it was all about talking to customers and making sure that we were only building the things that really added value and being transparent about where we were in the process, and building a system that was able to pivot relatively quickly, and building a team that wasn't so attached to sunk costs that if we made a massive pivot, there wasn't going to be any hard feelings because they knew that this was part of the process. So it was a wild time. I mean, we were selling things to, one group 1 month or 1 quarter, and then, another group the next month until we found our sweet spot. And that was in the pre-employment space.
So let's talk a bit about that a journey. So as Shawn mentioned, it sounds like you did a round before you got to product market fit.
Yeah.
How hard was that round to pull together? Were you expecting all your current investors to just re-up? Like, what was that? How did that capital to get you to product market fit come together, and any lessons or insights there?
So, I mean, we had a really strong hypothesis about what the product market fit was. And so the first round it wasn't easy, but it was relatively easy. It was friends and family. It was ourselves, like we were putting everything that we had on the line, and the angels and Inovia and Panache, who has been incredible as well. Right. Like really, yep. They believed in us, and great people with a bad idea can be very successful because they quickly figure out that original idea is not so great. So, when it came time to do another round, because we tried to raise relatively slowly just so that, we were being sensitive to dilution. We expected that a number of our investors would re-up, and almost everyone did, which was incredible. And then when we went out to do our proper seed round that was led by Tribe, who Shawn was talking about earlier, we had a lot of competition for the round, which was amazing. And it made it easier because we were really transparent and we were involved with our investors. We talked about the failures as much as the successes, because to product market fit, your negative assessments to your hypothesis are more valuable than your positive, because sometimes the positives are a false indicator. The no is usually more right than the yes.
Yeah. And then, you know what, that's not obvious to many people, Andrew. That's a key learning.
And then, so you had a lot of no's, which informed you how to get to product market fit. How did you know when you had product market fit? Like, everyone talks about it, but it seems like it's some mythical thing. You just know you have it. So is there one day you woke up and said, shit, we have it? Like, or how did you know?
The phones just started ringing, like you went from going, please give us a try and tell us what you think, to companies saying, I've heard about you, or my friend referred me to you, and then all of a sudden the phones start ringing. And for Evan and I, who were doing the sales, we were the sales force. That was really apparent. And it really came, we started doing some pre-employment screening work, and then we ended up working with the police here in Canada, the RCMP and various police detachments, to change the way criminal record checks are done in Canada. And it was a crazy idea that the police bought into, with seven gentlemen in Victoria, and we released it. And we didn't we had a hypothesis that this was a really big problem, and then we released it, and it was like we couldn't stop the momentum if we tried.
So
I just loved that growth hack, by the way. That was such a testament to creativity, and yeah.
And then, people think once you have product market fit, it's off into the races. But I usually find companies fall apart at that point too. There's a bunch of new challenges because it's actually working. So what happened when that phone wouldn't stop ringing?
We focused on building our core product, which was the criminal record check process here in Canada. We focused on making that really, really solid and making sure that wasn't going to break, because with that came, can you do reference checks? Can you do employment verification? Can you do education verification? We need you to do, this, that, and the other thing. And so we really had to build a framework for our team of what we were going to build, what we were going to buy, and what we were going to partner on. And we didn't have much money to buy, so we had to figure out, how could we partner? And that actually led us to kind of our second innovation, which was, how do we do criminal checks in a whole bunch of different countries? Because as Canadians, we don't have the largest market in the world. And we also have a very diverse group of people here in Canada. So to be able to do checks in Canada is great. But if you're starting to work with larger businesses, you need to be able to do checks in dozens of countries or hundreds of countries in our case. And so we started looking for partners around the world to figure out, how do we build a single source of truth for all of this risk relevant information? And that started with building a really strong core that was API first, that could easily spin up checks in a new country or a different type of check, whether it be credit, criminal, motor vehicle records, anything an employer or gig company would need to help build trust within their community or their organization. We focused on that, and we focused on the team. So I mean, my team is the most important thing in the world. I feel like as a team we could do anything, and so the product was important, but building a strong core and a team that could adapt was crucial.
And Shawn, at this point, I guess sounds like you set out the round with that tribe led. What's your day-to-day observation? How are you interacting with Andrew and the team? What's Inovia doing? And what is the sense you're getting there? Are you now getting eager to participate again? It's just love to hear.
There's not a single event. I think what we started to see is some predictability of revenue, some ability to see what was coming. We started to see Andrew develop a team that was aligned around moving from that experimental phase to building a large business. I started to hear ideas from Andrew that were way far out there of acquiring, of expanding into new categories, new geographies. I just saw effectively, Andrew, your world grow in a vision of what's possible, and being able to participate in that. And you started talking about around later in the year, in 2020, right? And it was like, if this and this and this happen, and that's where we kind of go to work and say, well, what happens if this goes right? And what happens if in fact these things all come together? And by the way, how can we support a founder to increase the chance of those things going right, to reduce the risk and maybe accelerate that? And when we played that out for ourselves, we could see that indeed coming to market to raise a round in late 2020 would be very compelling. And so we kind of huddled, reviewed all the, I think we had like 1 or 2 calls. It wasn't that much actually, detail. And we had a call, and then I decided to do something that I've never done before, Alex. COVID had started. It was a little bit awkward. I said, okay, I think the play here is, I called you up and I said, I'd like to come and give you a term sheet. Could you meet later today?
And Andrew, what were you thinking when you got that call?
I was thinking, well, knowing Shawn, I was like, later today, he lives in Calgary. And then I was like, wait a minute, like, how's he going to get here? And I was like, maybe he's going to he might take the helicopter. And yeah, he flew here later today. And I was really excited because,
I think we scheduled the following morning because you wanted to reflect a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And I had a recollection of that call.
I had my daughter like 5 days before.
Good time to strike.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's actually a pretty romantic story because Hannah, who we had kept in touch with, and we become really close friends with Hannah. She just called to say congratulations on your daughter, and we were just kind of catching up personally. And then it got into when you're thinking about raising. I mean, you've got a daughter now. Like are you pushing that off? And like, yeah, like we'll probably do it a little bit later. I don't know what being a parent's going to be like and going through a process. And she's like, well, I can talk to my team here. I know Shawn's Shawn and the team are interested. We love you guys. Let's see what we can do. And I think, the next day I was on the phone with Shawn, and
the rest is history.
Yeah. And there's never been it's never been easier to say yes, like they made it so easy and fair. And I mean, Shawn was here in a day. And we already had that love and respect, which was awesome. It made it so easy.
So there was a relationship there. It was, I guess, a good offer. A couple things I'd love to know, like, what was the implicit relationship? So, Shawn's leading this A round. What was there talk about what you guys are going to do next and do together? Or was it just, hey, we want to invest? Like, how's that come? Like, what was the promises made beyond capital?
Good question.
Yeah, really good question. I think the big one was we talked in a lot of depth about what the future of Certn looked like, and what our strategy was and how our resources could be aligned. And we had an unfair advantage in that we knew the Inovia network. And if you go onto the Inovia website, like when Shawn talks about he's got 50 people, like he's got 50 superhumans, like the greatest connectors. I mean, there's people on Shawn's team that, Patrick Pichette, like literally there's like a book written about this guy. He was a CFO of Google, chairman of Twitter. Like, he's one of the greatest Canadian businessmen of all time. And they want to be involved with your company. You've already had a taste. What I knew what being part of the Inovia family was all about, and then to have them lead around was awesome. So we had to deliver on our commitments, which was great, but we knew that we had a lot of experience to help get us there, and that had been a challenge in my previous businesses where we were trying to get from point A to point B, but didn't necessarily have people that had done it before that were eager to help get involved. And when you get older, you realize that you don't know everything, and you actually don't know most things. So if you can leverage the smartest people in the world, you should definitely do it.
And Shawn, from your perspective?
What? Just that?
Like, when you come with the term sheet, like it sounds like you had the discussions. I don't know. Were you a board member before this round, or did you join as a board member? So I guess one of the things you did.
Well, we talked about the board. That was one of the key points of alignment, because our term sheets have a diversity and inclusion clause, and it sort of is to test for alignment of whether or not there's really a commitment to building high-performing teams that benefit from a diverse set of experiences and perspectives in multiple dimensions. And here I'm meeting with a founder group of 3 same age, same background, same education, same attitude founders that were kind of the opposite. So that was a bit of an awkward moment when we thought. And I found out there was a deep commitment and action already in place to build a board and to build an executive team that really could reflect the makeup of Certn's customers, of Certn's base, and be an asset to attracting diverse talent rather than a liability that limited the talent pool we could draw from and retain. And so that turned out to be a pivotal moment in the conversation. The valuation one was a little bit of an easier conversation, as I recall, because I think I just gave you a pen and a blank form and you filled in the number, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
That is correct. That was.
I know Inovia does that for all their deals, right, Shawn?
We do not. We do not. There was some trust here that allowed that to happen, because the conversation was working backwards from the outcome that we're building. And how is that a win-win for all of us as stakeholders? What's the valuation that's the right balance? How far do you want to reach, and what does that feel like? So it was, instead of being a win-lose conversation, it was really and aligned. And I was able to be vulnerable in that moment and fulfill the commitment of genuinely letting you guys group decide on a number and you wrote it down. Like, that was kind of cool.
That was probably the coolest experience of my entire life, and also the one of the hardest, because you don't want to be overvalued, or you'll never be able to raise again. You
Well,
have trust
you understood
in
and
the other
respected my in the relationship as well, which is a great start.
I love that point there about not overvaluing yourself. I think most founders, can you explain a bit that? Because I don't think most founders understand the risk of overvaluing yourselves.
Well, I mean, the worst thing in the world is having to do a down round. It's so hard. Fundraising is hard as it is, and it doesn't matter what your connections are. A down round is hard. And so you have to be really careful when you're, looking at valuations and you're looking at the future, that you could get a higher valuation. You could, there's an opportunity there, but if you don't have the right people behind you, the right support to get you to where you need to be, you can run into a lot of trouble. And I talk about trust and trust building because that's what Certn does. Our mission is to build trust in people. And if you don't have trust in the partner and they just give you a really high valuation, that makes you vulnerable later. And so finding a valuation that's really fair, and at the same time looking at partners that can help you exceed that valuation so that everybody wins is hugely important. And that was the awesome relationship that we had with Inovia to be able to get there.
And then talk about trust and relationships. So Shawn, you joined the board. How does that change your relationship, or the way you interact, or responsibilities toward each other? Because it sounds like you guys had a great relationship beforehand.
Yeah, you know what? Great, sure, but thin, and event driven as opposed to sustained, right? And so actually I'm less active in the board here, and that's I would say a small dimension of our relationship. What's more important for me is that Andrew and I connect every Friday morning like clockwork, and I come with a strong agenda of doing nothing and just listening.
It's the most valuable meeting. It's the most valuable meeting of my week. It's a lot. It goes way beyond what a board does. I mean, Shawn's a friend, also a coach, a mentor. He's one of those people that I can talk to about the stuff that sucks and also the stuff that's amazing. I mean, fortunately, there's a lot more amazing stuff, but you need to work on the stuff that you need to work on the no's more than the yeses in a lot of cases, because that's the stuff that you're not great at. And I think, when you're looking for investors, finding someone like Shawn that you want to spend time with, that you respect their opinion, and that when they need to tell you something that's hard, they're doing it with your best interest is really important for new founders to know, because sometimes you don't want to hear that, but you need to.
Okay, can I talk about maybe a few of the things that may be hard? I would love to hear how you tackle them, especially
Sure.
as you thought of growth. So like, when I think about your business, you're building trust. And there's I imagine there's two challenges for information you get. There's how do you respect privacy, and also how do you avoid false positives, and what's the liability there? How do you think about is this something you discuss with Shawn, and like how do you think about building that from a product perspective?
So from a product perspective, early on we had a really strong focus on privacy. Dr. David Flaherty, former privacy commissioner, was a very early advisor in Certn. And things like false positives and false negatives can be detrimental to businesses and also individuals. I mean, you don't want to be labeled as something that you're not. So we really focused as a core step on identity verification, making sure that we find the right person and that we get information directly from the source and not from more questionable sources of information. And that was a really important part in building the product. And also because we felt that the background check processes on the market never really made you feel good. They weren't easy. There was a lot of paperwork. You felt like you were giving up something that you probably shouldn't, where we want to make sure that our candidates get a copy of the report, or they can access their reports, that they get the details of the information, that the process is fair and transparent, and they're not having to sign a waiver that requires them to, give up a kidney or part of their liver, and that the information that's being shared is relevant to the cause. Because, if you're applying for a job that requires you to not be a criminal, then 99% of people are like, here you go. Like,
Yeah.
Here's something that says I'm not a criminal. So let's make that process painless. But there shouldn't be anything that like is in your personal life that doesn't affect your business or what you do in your job that gets shared. And we're very, very passionate about that, because trust goes two ways. If you're overreaching as a business, that doesn't provide trust from, say, the employee to the employer, and that trust needs to be mutual in both ways.
And then I'd love to hear your perspective on like competition, because like I think before you guys even launched, there was Checker out there that was at one point grew with the gig economy, was sort of a valley darling. Don't hear about it as much anymore. So, I'd love to hear how you think about them, and then also Inovia, like when or Shawn, from Inovia's perspective, when you invested, what do you think about what looks like large startups that are maybe a year or two ahead?
So when I look at competition, I saw background check companies that were doing tech, and I didn't see tech companies that were in the background check space. I also saw a narrow focus around pre-employment screening and background screening in general, where I see an opportunity that's a lot bigger and a lot more global. So a lot of the background check companies are based in the US. They're very US focused. They do things the American way. And the American way in the world of trust is actually not typical compared to the rest of the world. So we looked at it from an outside in perspective. We looked at it from, how do we see it in Canada or Australia or the UK or Europe? And how do we see it as a common problem? Because the problem is not background checks. The problem is, how do you get information from a consenting individual in a way that's fair and equitable and fast? And that problem spans far beyond just pre-employment. It spans into everything you do, whether it's gig or it's financial services or insurance or you name it. In any instance where you're dealing with a person, or you need to build trust with a person that you've never met before, there is an opportunity to incorporate that. And I know that our competitors aren't looking at it that way. And they're really focused on like, how do we deliver a better user experience for background checks, but not looking at like the core problem.
And Shawn, from Inovia's perspective, when you were looking at writing that big check, what do you view? When you look, how do you view the competitive landscape?
Yeah, Alex. We came with an independent perspective on the market from our work in future of work as a macro thesis that had driven multiple investments for us, and in believing that there was a distributed global workforce emerging, not only for gig economy, but broadly happening. And for me, it was not interesting to back a smaller Canadian version of Checker. Checker was a great success, really sort of stepped out of the traditional mold, but really was a half step in my view, and a start to a much larger opportunity in a category which was a tailwind. And so, when I looked at Andrew's vision, if I had seen that as, hey, we're going to get a hold in Canada with sort of the Checker playbook, and then we'll figure out how to go head to head, and like that just had no interest for me whatsoever. But instead, what I heard was, yeah, watch what these guys have done. They sort of only did half the stuff. And by the way, they're trapped in the US. They can't access global. And as employees, as US companies want to hire global employees, they're like screwed with Certn. Like they're better, but they're only incrementally better. They don't actually solve it. We're going to do this. We're going to go around it, and we'll use our Canadian advantage to leapfrog into a global business around. It was like, of course that makes perfect sense. And when you take a larger and a longer view of how do you use Checker's strengths against them, rather than feeling that you have to follow them, then that's the world that can unfold for you. And that's really what we're doing here.
I love that.
Yeah.
Since your investment, it seems like despite COVID, things have gone really well. I think, there was another round. So how's your relationship change as Certn gets bigger, and you bring in more investors around the table? What happens now?
Well, I think Shawn's part of a really strong foundation and a key part of that foundation. So I don't think that our relationship changes so much as the conversations that we have start to shift from, the tactical to the who do we bring to the table to make this successful. When we closed our A round that Shawn led, Shawn came on the board. The day that the round closed, we had you usually have like a ceremonial board meeting because we had a whole new board of amazing people, but we had a term sheet to review because the day the round closed, we had another term sheet.
Sounds tough.
And so it's
success begets success, right? And you have more backers.
Yeah, and we had to make some tough calls.
Yeah.
We didn't need the capital. There was expertise among that group that we thought was valuable, and we needed to pick and choose and make sure that we structured it the right way. And then how do we execute on that? Because that again posed more risk where we didn't need the capital. We need to figure out how to deploy incremental capital efficiently, because sitting on cash isn't responsible. You need to make sure that you're deploying capital efficiently and that you're utilizing that capital, because otherwise you're taking unnecessary dilution. And so it's been really great going through that process, and then also figuring out, what are our commitments, what do we think is possible, and working back from the metrics that we have today to see where we can be in the future, and then committing to them and making sure that we're committing the resources to the right parts of the company to exceed those commitments. And Shawn's been huge in that.
And so what is the future? If you look out, what's the 5-year, 10-year vision from now?
So I want to be the rails that connect all of the risk relevant information in the world, which makes us the center of trust. So I like to think of us as you want to be certain about someone. So anytime, what you say Kleenex when you mean facial tissue, when you think background checks or getting information about a person, in 10 years, I want that to be the case with Certn. And I also see it as, Certn as a venue for individuals to be able to store their own information. So, a lot of the information is owned by you, the individual, and you should be able to have access to that information and to be able to share it with whom you please. And I think that's the future of our industry, is to be able to have that two-way trust where you can have your own information as well as share it with a business or another individual for the purposes of building that trust. And so I want to power the trust economy.
Shawn, anything to add to that vision?
That's the vision. It comes from the CEO, not a board member.
Yeah, I love that answer. A few more really quick hits. One,
sure.
Andrew, you're in Victoria. Shawn, you're in Calgary. And lots of the ecosystem we talk about, Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. What are the advantages of being in those two locations that people understand?
No snow for the most part in Victoria. So recruiting people from Toronto for 6 months a year is great. Toronto or Montreal. And now with COVID though, the barriers to talent around the country they're gone. We're recruiting people in New Brunswick, Newfoundland, Calgary, Toronto, Montreal. It doesn't matter where people are anymore. So you can live where you want to live, and still have the best talent in the country.
Shawn, from a Calgary perspective?
Well, look, I live in Calgary. I work distributed. Inovia's had this model pre-COVID. I see many of our founders now choosing a remote first culture coming out of COVID. It's not a company by company decision necessarily, by the way. In some firms, I see that a department by department decision will feel different. What one team might work better co-located with a few remote people, another might be fully distributed. The hybrid can be awkward. And so being thoughtful about, if we're going to be distributed, maybe that means remote first, so the people in the office will join a Zoom separately rather than in a room, so as to make those remote feel like a second-class citizen. Those are the kinds of conversations that we're having across our portfolio as they wrestle with this. To be honest, COVID's been a boon for me because I've been able to spend more time at home with everybody remote. If I'm not in the room, if I'm not in Toronto or Vancouver or San Francisco or Montreal, I'm a first-class citizen because everybody's at home now. So really, it's been better for remote workers like myself.
Cool. Second to last question. If you could, for both of you, what startup would you like to see exist? It doesn't have to be necessarily venture scale, but what's the one idea you'd like to see someone execute that would make life interesting or better?
Electric flying cars.
I think there's a bunch of SPACs for that.
Probably. It would make it easier to chase Shawn around if I could fly with a basic driver's license.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot more to do in tools to support collaboration, better work teams, and we're seeing that broadly. I guess that is part of future of work, and I guess having the trust infrastructure tools like Certn are a part of that as well. But I think there's a lot of tremendous value to be created in that area.
And then final question, how can people get in touch with you? Is it give a Twitter account, an email account? Start with Shawn. Shawn, what's the best way for someone to get in touch with you?
Google Shawn Abbott. You'll find me on all those.
Andrew?
Spell it like that, I pop up.
Yeah. Same here. Andrew McLeod. I think it's Andrew McLeod, I. There are 301 Andrew McLeods. I am the goofiest one. So,
yeah, and for people listening to the podcast, it's Shawn with SHAWN, not SEAN.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed there's like some athlete, Shawn Abbott, that had some tragic event when I was doing some research.
I wasn't aware.
Guys, thank you so much for this conversation. I think it was very insightful. It leaves me super excited, and I really appreciate all the time.
That's been fun,
Thanks,
Alex.
Same here.
Appreciate it.
Well, hopefully I'll be able to break bread with you guys sometime in the near future as Canada emerges from lockdown.
Can't wait. Thanks, Alex.
Cool. Thanks. For everyone that's here, if you're just listening to this on YouTube or paying attention live, we have all previous Founders and Fundings recorded as podcasts. So check it out wherever you listen to your podcast. If you want to continue learning from Founders and Funding, we do have an upcoming one in July 9th from Kerry Goldman and Joseph West. Kerry works at Bain. Joseph is Relay Financial, one of our new fintech players in the economy. Come check it out, sign up, participate live. We look forward to having you there. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're around and you want to network, feel free. We're going to open up networking, meet other people in the community, spend 4 or 5 minutes getting to know another founder, another early stage employee, and learn from each other. See how you can help each other. Don't make it transactional.